Hello, everybody, and welcome back to No More Mondays. I am your host, Angie Callen, and this is a show where we believe you can have a thriving career, life, or business on your terms. This episode is brought to you by The Modern Coach, the place where we think humans are awesome. Are you ready to create that intentional business, career, and team and life on your terms? Well, we've got some tools to help you on that front. So head on over to themoderncoach.co/core values to learn more. And now on with the show. Today's guest is someone who is rewriting the rules around collaboration, communication, and innovation in the workplace, and doing it all with equal parts truth and grace. Neelu Kaur is an organizational psychologist, keynote speaker, and author of Be Your Own Cheerleader. She helps companies turn self-advocacy into revenue-generating action by tackling what she calls the teamwork trap. I'm intrigued. It's the idea that consensus culture, while well-meaning, can quietly kill great ideas before they ever see the light of day. And you know I love a good collaborative moment, so this perspective definitely gives me some food for thought. So here to challenge our thinking about what collaboration might be costing us and what we can do about it, please welcome to the show, Neelu Kaur. Neelu, welcome to No More Mondays.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here.
Neelu and I have connected through kind of I would say, a group of like-minded conscious entrepreneurs, and we've had some conversations not recorded. And so I'm excited to learn a little bit more about this. And before we hopped on this morning, we were kind of talking about this. It's a little bit contrarian, this idea of the negative side of collaboration. And as somebody who loves people, loves collaboration, and maybe the loud voice in the room, I am definitely curious about what you call this teamwork trap. So tell us a little bit more about it and how it shows up for teams and leaders / what's this thing we need to be thinking about this collaboration and consensus culture. So tell us more about this teamwork trap.
Yeah, so teamwork trap in my mind is this over-indexing on collaboration and consensus, where it's like, I don't know if you know the stat, but 31 hours a month in meetings. So we spend 31 hours a month in meetings. And that is the standard.
Meaningless meetings. How many of those are actually productive?
Right. And so the question then becomes, meetings are definitely a vampire of innovation, but it's also like, I borrowed this concept of generous exclusion from Priya Parker's work in The Art of Gathering. And one thing she says about any gathering, and in this case, we're talking about meetings as the gathering or the container, is that you want to be really intentional about who's in the room, because oftentimes, as you know, meetings might have 8, 12 people in there. And it's like, why are so many people in these meetings? I work a lot with tech and a lot with the big tech giants, and they often have so many cooks in the kitchen. And it's like, what is everyone doing? And then the loudest voice in the Zoom room or the Google Meet room, like, they get the idea heard, and everyone else just sort of like is processing. And it's all about speed and efficiency. And I believe that speed does not equal innovation. And so I think with an over-indexing on meetings and collaboration, it's like we are not giving people space to do deep critical thinking work and innovative thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. This hits home because I have a client I'm working with who's an executive in a not a tech first, but who's trying to become a tech first company. Mm-hmm. And, the burnout is real. And, yeah. in trying to unpack exactly where it's coming from and how much she works, we stumbled upon this topic of like meetings, 26 hours, not a month, Neelu, a week she spends in meetings. And I'm like, when do you actually go do the work? Right. And so, and tech is great for the good old daily stand-up. And so it's like too much and too frequent to actually be effective, because when all the cooks are just in the kitchen cooking, when do you ever stop and eat?
Right. Right. Yeah. And then when do you ever stop and say, wait, does the kitchen have everything we need in order for us to cook? Like, there's so many things that you have to think about that if you can only do that when you are not cooking. Right.
Yeah, it's almost like and I think some of this has to do with the fact that we have the enablement to be together more frequently. And so there's this illusion that it's kind of not to get soapboxy already, but like at a societal level, we are more connected yet more disconnected than ever. And in a way that's trickling down to this, like the ineffectiveness of meetings and the inefficiency that they create, even though it seems like they do. And so this is one example of, let's say, unhealthy collaboration. Talk to me a little bit more about the differences between maybe healthy collaboration and toxic consensus at more of the interactive level.
I mean, if you think about it, there are some people that struggle with being quick on their feet, and it could be for a variety of reasons. They could be neurospicy. I heard that said different than neurodivergent, and I love that. You could have just a different time and speed of processing. So you're in this meeting, there's all these things being thrown around, but you need more time to process. So then you're quiet. People perceive that as you being disengaged, but it's like, no, I actually need to sit down and think. And so I think that there's this constant thing like, oh, everything like AI is happening and this is happening and this is going on. And it's just constant context switching. And there's not really space baked into our days for deep critical thinking and creative thinking. And so I think one of the things that can be so helpful is really like generously excluding people from meetings, making sure the right people are in the room. And then that's where it all starts, actually.
Yeah, intention.
Absolutely.
Intention. And there's a lot of truth to the processor or the introspection. I have a neurospicy spouse.
Okay.
And also love the word neurospicy. I learned about it a year ago from some creative neurospicy friends, and I was like, that's perfect. And so I have a neurospicy spouse who gets very frustrated sometimes at the fact that he does not process things as quickly as I do. And I have to really be mindful of that because my brain is 3 parts down the conversation before it comes out of my mouth. And not everybody's like that from a communication style, but then also the internal processing. How many times have we sat in a room with somebody who is quiet the whole meeting and we could assume they're disengaged, only to at minute 29 of 30, they open their mouth and say the most brilliant thing of the entire meeting. And it was because they were actually listening.
Right. Yeah.
Listening is a powerful tool.
It's so powerful. And yet we are, like you were talking about, the devices, and we're so disconnected. And I think there's definitely a parallel process. Like what we're seeing going on in the world happens in organizations, happens on teams. And so everyone, even in these meetings, they're on their phone too. And they're disconnected. It's like they're not even fully present. So yeah, I have a big gripe with just excessive meetings and meetings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Meetings for meeting's sake need to go away. So I would say lesson number 1 from today's show is have less meetings. Do you need, and I actually would even say that if you're not the one scheduling them, it is okay to look and see if you actually need to be there. And if you don't, you proactively communicate the fact that I will not be there because it isn't essential. And if you have a question in advance, I can answer it. And if you do well in the meeting, this person's the go-to, right? You can advocate for yourself, which is part of kind of your platform too, in this concept of like being your own cheerleader, whether it's trying to get out of a meeting that's a waste of time or whether it is to, be heard when you tend to be quiet. So tell me a little bit more about how this translates down to like that individual level of self-advocacy.
So one of the things before we can even go there, I think, oftentimes people will say, oh, I'm not good at talking about myself, or, oh, it feels really viscerally uncomfortable to toot my own horn. And before we even go into like, what are the skills or what can you do? It's really like understanding and not feeling bad about it. There's actually research why people struggle with self-advocacy. And there's certain groups of people that struggle more than other groups. So for example, if you come from a military background, you are all about the group and group harmony and the we and not so much the I. So if you become boastful, you stick out and then you think, oh, I'm not part of the team. So you're conditioned to believe that, there's no I, it's just we, right? So that's one group of people that might struggle. If you're extremely introverted, you might just always kind of like want to stay under the radar. Neurospicy, you probably spent your whole life just trying to like stay under the radar so no one would find out that you were neurospicy in a room. Right. And then there's also, I talk about this a lot, is if you come from a collective culture or you're raised by people in collective culture. So Asia, collective culture, Latin is collective, Arab cultures, African cultures. There's certain cultures that are much more we based, and it's all about group harmony, and it's all about consensus, and it's about not rocking the boat. And as you can tell, as I'm giving you all of these descriptions, that is a recipe for disaster in corporate America. If you just with everything and then you're basically people assume you're disengaged, that you don't care. And it's really not that that's not the case at all. It's literally that you don't know how to speak up, or you don't feel comfortable because you were ostracized for it if you tried to do that early in your life.
Yeah. And I find this also comes the belief system we grew up with heavily impacts that, whether it's culturally, religions can impact that. Military is a great example of it. And communication styles in our heads. I also find, and this might be for any of you that don't fall into that bucket, and you're like the good old American, because nobody communicates like Americans, y'all. In case you haven't studied international linguistics and communication styles, I also find this happens at an interview level, where leaders, when we are working inside our teams, need to and should, rightly so, adopt the we mentality. But then all of a sudden we go to an interview where we need to own the I in the team. And that can be difficult. And it seems like self-promotion, where we need to start thinking about is self-advocacy. And there's a difference between the two. And I would love for you to talk a little bit more about that difference.
Yeah. And I want to just circle back one thing to the American comment. So if you were raised in a small town in the US, you were probably taught to be humble, to, just because it's a small town, everyone knows what everyone's doing. It is very collective. And you may have not thought about it through that lens, because in general, North America and the US specifically is very individualistic. So, you may say, oh, no, I don't fall into those buckets that we just talked about, but maybe you do, right? Or maybe it's just not comfortable for you. But I think, what happens for a lot of us is, at least for those of us that come from collective cultures or we're part of these other groups, is that we feel so comfortable in the we, that when we have to flex and go in the I, it's like we don't know how to, or it feels really uncomfortable, or it's really awkward. We don't know what to say. So I like to think of it as a dial, like a speedometer, a we and I, and based on who's in front of you, you adjust. So if you are in a performance review conversation, that is the time to turn up the I. It's like, I did all of these things. I accomplished this. I hit Q1 goals. I brought in X amount of blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? Like, it's all about the I. When you're in a brainstorm with your group, that's all about the we, our shared outcomes, our shared deliverables. So your language changes. You're still authentic to who you are, but you have this dial in your mind and you're like, I'm still being Neelu. I'm just adjusting based on who's in front of me.
Yes. Okay. So I'm a big platform of authenticity person, and authenticity doesn't necessarily mean you're the same all the time. It means you have the self-awareness to know the value you bring to a room and to relate that in context. It doesn't mean you shape shift. There's a difference there. But it is the grounding of being yourself, but knowing how to twist that. And I mean that in a positive way, to build the bridge of communication. And I think that there are ways to do that don't feel that braggy, that don't give us that braggy feeling that we're kind of allergic to.
Yes. Agreed.
You know what I would love, and this might be putting you on the spot, I would love an example of how that sounds.
Okay. In what context?
So, let's say we've got somebody who needs to toggle between the we of a team and own the I in the team because they're in a performance review. How does it sound to own that in a self-advocacy way, instead of something that could feel more braggy or promotional?
I think if we prepare, right? We prepare. So we have a list of all of our bullet points, our talking points. And then one strategy that I like to use is, when you're preparing, to create that emotional distance, because it does feel viscerally uncomfortable. It's like, talk about it in third person. So you would say, Neelu got XYZ done in Q1. Neelu got this certification. Neelu got promoted in this organization. Neelu, blah, 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 blah. And then when it's time to be in that conversation, you move into first person. So it's very I-based. It's like, I hit these goals. I hit the sales quota. I hit these, right? And it's like, it doesn't feel as viscerally uncomfortable because you've practiced and you've created that emotional distance. And I think that is a really good strategy for those of us that struggle to talk about I or me or my.
Yeah, I like that idea. And some of this does come down to preparing. And one, you've got to identify what's what and what's different. A lot of people have a hard time owning a part of a whole because they feel like they shouldn't take any individual credit for any of it. When in actuality, it wouldn't have come out the way it did had you not had a part of a whole or been leading the whole even. And so I think objectifying the situation is one way to do that, and talking about it in the objective third person. That's why resumes are written in that third person, by the way. It feels more objective. It feels more, feels less braggy. And so that's a really good tip. And so since we're into like little tricks and tips, which I love giving away here, that's a really good way to think about transitioning self-promotion into self-advocacy. Mm-hmm. Now I want to go back to the meeting that we don't want to be in, but we're in anyway. If you're somebody out there who is more introverted or sometimes feels like you're too quiet, overlooked, you're not the loud voice in the room, what are one or two things somebody like that can start doing to feel more heard or feel like they can actually assert themselves, even though it's uncomfortable?
Yeah. Have a conversation with the meeting organizer and say, hey, this is something I'm working on. And then have them thread you into the conversation where they feel like you would have something beneficial to say. I think when we're open about the things that we're working on, everyone wants to help. Right. And so it's a two-way street. It's like you as the individual contributor, until you communicate that you struggle with this, your manager or the team or the meeting organizer is not even going to know. So have a conversation, let them know that, you've gotten feedback or this is something that you're working on. And so if they could thread you into the conversation at the appropriate time, that would be great.
That's a great idea. And here's the big news flash there, everybody. That vulnerability is not a liability. And for some reason that we have taken on this idea of like, perfection. I could go on and on about that. But this admitting, hey, I'm working on something does not show weakness. It is willing to be vulnerable in order to get help growing through it. And if that's what it takes to get somebody to be your ally as you begin to figure out how to be an advocate for yourself, that's what it takes.
That's what it takes. And it also takes the leader to be cognizant of those around him or her and say, hey, this person is more back-footed. She doesn't speak up as much. Maybe I need to loop her into the conversation. Maybe I'll let her know before the meeting that I'm going to have her speak more so she's more comfortable. You see what I mean? So it's like, it's a two-way street. It takes onus on both the leader and the individual contributor.
Well, and I love that you went there, because I was totally thinking about the flip side of this is, right, like we as individuals can go to our leaders and advocate for the needs that we have to grow. What can leaders do more proactively in order to either meet us in that moment or maybe get us into that moment for those people that don't get to the self-advocacy?
I think one of the key things about everything in life is self-awareness, right? And awareness, not just of yourself, but of others. This is EQ in its essence, right? So knowing on your team, who's more front-footed, who's always speaking up, who's more back-footed, who takes more processing time, and then switching it out, letting more of the back-footed people come forward, let the forward people go back. Like it's a dance. And I think it's a leader. That's the responsibility of a leader, a good leader, a transformational leader.
Yeah, because the same goes for just as much as you may make space for, a more introverted, the back-footed person to intentionally come forward. You may also have to speak to the one who talks all the time and say, hey, I need you to do me a favor in this particular meeting and pull it back 10% because we're trying to work together to rise somebody else up. And that isn't chastising somebody. These are all of it is just as hard to shut up as it is to speak up when you have that personality. Ask me how I know. And so I think as a leader, the EQ to understand that dynamics is really important to create that inclusive space you talk about.
Yes, I 100% agree. I think it's not just, I struggle with this and I'm going to learn how to do this. It's also, like you were saying, vulnerability is not liability. Having the conversation that, hey, I really struggle with this and it would be helpful if you could loop me into this conversation, because I actually have a lot to say about this topic.
Which may bring me exactly to where we were about to go, which is your book.
Yeah.
Be Your Own Cheerleader. This is like the most full circle moment. And I wanted to make sure we talked a little bit about this. And you used the word vulnerability, and where I wanted to start was kind of where this concept came from for you personally.
Yeah, well, it came from a lot of getting fired and downsized, to the point where I have lost count of how many times I've been fired or downsized. And I always say this, it is not because I'm not smart or that I didn't have creative ideas. It was because I did not know how to advocate for those ideas and be my own cheerleader. So the last downsizing was 2013. And at that point I was like, okay, something's going on, because I have this pattern. And I didn't know it at the time, but it set into motion the concepts of Be Your Own Cheerleader. So through research, through my own experiences of being an entrepreneur, through coaching and training and speaking at all of these places, I realized like there are so many people that struggle with self-advocacy. And so I want to break it down from a research perspective, as well as like actionable strategies that people can use. And so the book targets Asian and South Asian women, but the principles are applicable to anyone that struggles with self-advocacy.
Well, and what I like about this is I'm going to tie back to authenticity, because I think I would love to hear a little bit more about the intersection of the two. Is that it can feel disingenuous for somebody who grew up in, a more collective culture versus the individualistic culture to step into this kind of stuff. And so how does somebody like that get to a point of it feeling genuine and authentic and not like posturing?
One of the things that can be so helpful is to practice in situations that are less high stakes. So for example, I used to be the type of person that if I was being invited to a group dinner or lunch and people were deciding like in the WhatsApp group, like, hey, where do you want to go? I would just be like, whatever. I'll go with whatever the group wants to do, because I don't want to rock the boat, because that's how I was conditioned to think and believe about my existence. I didn't want to rock the boat. So I would just go along with things. And so it's having the awareness that I'm doing it, right? So knowing when it's okay for me just to do that, that's fine. And there's other times when, no, I actually don't want to eat pizza. I want to go to Thai food, and having the ability to just speak up. And so I say, practice with your family, practice with your friends. Before, I used to do the same thing with my husband when we were dating. I would just say, okay, whatever he wants, it's fine. I don't want to rock the boat. And by me sharing with him, like, hey, I struggle with this. And also, sometimes I'm fine with just going along with whatever he wants to do. And other times I have an opinion. I want certain things. It's like, yeah, it's safe to say that here. And when I get in the habit of doing that, it becomes so much easier to start practicing in a meeting, in a smaller meeting, and then maybe in a big meeting, and maybe in a big town hall even. Like eventually you will get to the place where it just feels like, okay, I've got enough reps in, just like when we go to the gym. It's like we got to get those reps in order to feel like it's part of our being.
And ultimately, you do make your life easier in many ways. So I love the idea of practice in a less intimidating, or like almost close to non-intimidating environment, and then get into higher levels of complexity. But ultimately, that idea of not wanting to rock the boat at all. Now, there's the opposite of like, holy cow, you're making me seasick, right? That like, there's a happy medium here. There's a time to rock the boat. There's a time to say what you want and don't want. And there are other times where you have to exercise the EQ. But ultimately, what I feel is that like, if you do not just say what you would like, ultimately at some point, you're going to have to say what you want or what you like. And you created a harder situation to do that, right? Now you have to undo sure, I said I would go out on Friday night, and now it's Friday night and it's 5 minutes to, and I don't want to. So now I have to undo the yes that I never should have said in the first place.
Right. So it's maybe like, why am I saying yes? Is it, again, it comes down to awareness. Like, am I saying yes because I truly want to do this? Sure, then go for it. And if it's no, then who's yes? Where's that yes coming from? Is the question I would ask.
Yeah. Is it yes just because you don't want to or can't say no? Or is it yes because it's yes? And I really think about that, because it is harder. You're not letting anyone down but yourself. And I don't know. The worst thing I can think about is looking back 20 years from now and going, man, I should have done more for myself. Which maybe is a good time to talk a little bit about this idea of cheerleadership, right? Because we as leaders have the ability to help people in these kind of like, getting started with advocacy. So tell me a little bit more about cheerleadership and why it's something that you think more leaders should embrace.
I think that when we think of any organization, any team, any organizational culture, we have to be a part of it, and we have to be apart from it. So in order for us to be a part of it, we want to make sure that we are doing the best for our team, that we're doing the best for the organization. And then there's also times when we have to be apart from, because we're being measured on what we're doing as individuals. So I think from a tactical perspective, it's like, even with your performance review, it's like, have aspects of a part of, have aspects of apart from. On your resume, same thing, right? Because you want to show that you're a team player, but you also want to show all of the things that you did, right? So there's this concept of a part of, apart from, that's both from a resume perspective, a performance review perspective, even a daily perspective. Like if you look at the tasks that you're doing daily, like how many of those tasks are you actually apart from the team? Because there are things that you need to do for yourself. And then there's tasks that have to be a part of the success of the team and how you're helping build the culture of that team as a leader. So I think when we think of it as a part of and apart from, it helps us because it helps us be our own cheerleader. We need to do both. And we can only do both if we set time and, again, that space to be apart from the team. Like this is not about the team. This is about what I brought to the team, the things that I did that led this team to be successful.
And I think this is like a skill set in a way. Some people naturally have it. Some people need to kind of build it. And it bleeds over, right? So if you can, like you said, if you can start low intimidation and maybe with like your friends and family, now you're actually going to exercise that more in life, and that built the confidence to do it in work. If we as leaders empower some people to have that voice at work, it may then bleed over into life. So it becomes a skill set that we can take kind of anywhere. And that portability is nice to being our own cheerleader everywhere that we go.
I think a phrase that helps me be my own cheerleader is whenever something, like, for example, I was on a line, CVS, right? And somebody cut in front of me. And in New York, it's not a good thing. It's not a good look because someone's going to say something. So right when that person did it, I didn't say anything, but in my mind, the phrase I always say is, I don't think so. I don't think so. When I stop and say, I don't think so, it allows me to say, well, what do I want? This behavior is not okay. I don't think so. So I said something. I didn't say it aggressively. I didn't want to cause a fight, but I was like, I was here before you, and everything was fine. The whole point is, I don't think so allows me to pause and be like, what is Neelu? What is it? What's good for Neelu in this moment? Especially for someone like me who was raised, don't rock the boat. This isn't our country. You don't want to draw too much attention to us or to you, right? So for someone like that, an immigrant mentality, I don't think so is a phrase that I live by.
I love the idea of a mantra because it's the pause, right? This is what disrupts the system or the cycle that are just the habitual, things that we do. And if you can bring awareness to them and you break the cycle, then you can start figuring out what to do about it. And I love this idea of I don't think so, because then you can start to think, well, what do I think?
Right. And also the way, you play around with it. It's like, is it, I don't think so, like whatever. Is it, I don't think so. Like how that
can even be the thing that comes out of your mouth in that moment.
Exactly. It's like, I don't think so takes on so many different variations.
Yeah. I thought you were going to tell me that's what you said. Like, I don't think so. That may not have gone over as well as, hey, I was here first.
Yeah. Well, I don't think so just allows me to pause. And sometimes I will say, like to my husband, I actually say, I don't think so. And then he'll say, okay, because it's a phrase I use a lot. It just helps me pause. It's a mantra for me internally. But I also think, like, if it helps you and you're a listener, use it. It's great. It just allows you to pause, break the pattern, and say, what does Angie want? What does Neelu want? Like, it just allows us to figure out what's best for us in that moment.
Pattern interrupters.
Yes.
And the big thing here is I'll say that there is a way, I like to call myself tactfully direct. I'm pretty no nonsense, but I also have found a way to do that as kindly as possible. Apparently, I'm very good at telling people they do things they do not want to hear in the most loving way possible.
That's a great
but like, my mom is listening and she will shake her head when I said that she has a really hard time with self-advocacy. And there is, to me, so I don't know where I came from in some regards from that fact, but I think there is a big difference. And this is like the summary point I want to make. There is a big difference between being aggressive, assertive, and asserting yourself enough to not be the doormat. And when we're talking about that in a work environment, that's what's really important, to make sure that we are staving off the negative side of collaboration, to be sure that the people who struggle to find that middle are heard and not constantly overrun by the, aggressive asserters.
Yeah. Again, it's that awareness of front-footed or back-footed, and just knowing like, hey, where do I typically feel comfortable, and how am I going to allow others to come forward if I'm the front-footed person? Like, I know for me, especially in groups, I end up, especially if it's in a learning situation, I am front-footed with asking questions because I'm so endlessly curious. But I've realized in certain situations, it can also be detrimental to the group's well-being if I'm the only one asking questions. So it's like, no, I actually am very self-aware about how much I'm talking and how many questions I'm asking. And that allows me to give space to others around me that need to ask questions.
I love the visual of the front-footed and back-footed, because then there's also a time where we just need to be neutral and just stand evenly on both feet.
Grounded, firmly connected to the earth.
There you go. Yeah. I love it. Neelu, how do people find out about this book to get more of this wisdom, and how do we follow you for more great thoughts on how to be your own cheerleader in work and life?
Yeah. So book can be found anywhere you can find books, and Audible, all of the stuff. My publisher has done a great job with that. And you can find me on LinkedIn. That's my most active platform. Also my website, neelukaur.com. And I'm on Instagram. And I would say I'm more active on LinkedIn, but you can reach me. Yeah, exactly.
Same. Yeah. And you can find Neelu through my network. And I definitely suggest that you follow what she's doing, because the work we're at a shift in corporate culture, I believe. And this is the kind of stuff that, like, I think is one step ahead, and everybody's about to catch up. And if you're thinking like this as a leader, or even in leading in your life, you're going to be better for it. And so are the people around you.
Yeah, I love that. I think leadership doesn't mean just a leader in an organization. It's leader of your family, leader of your religious organization, leader of wherever you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And bring that awareness. Who's a front foot, who's a back foot, and where is neutral grounding the best way to meet a moment? Because it sounds odd, but I'll go back to where we started this whole conversation. Collaboration doesn't necessarily mean consensus. And that's an important thing to know, because great ideas don't always come from the loudest person in the room. I would actually even say oftentimes they do not come from the loudest person in the room. And sometimes it is our job as leaders in all of the situations we face to make sure that different voices are listened to in the way they need to be heard. Yeah.
And I would just add one thing. If you are someone that struggles with self-advocacy, having a mantra or a phrase for pattern interrupt, find one that works for you. For me, I don't think so. It's brilliant. It's easy. It's simple. I know it. It just comes out. It's the first thing I say to myself. And so find a sentence, a phrase that works for you.
Find your mantra, find your pattern interrupter. And I'm trying to think of it. I'm like, what's mine? I bet I have one. I also awareness is an amazing thing, y'all. I bet I have one, and I bet you all have one that you are not aware enough of to use. And now this conversation is going to make you go, oh, I say that to myself in my head, in my subconscious 92 times a day. Bring it forward and use it as a tool.
Well, I didn't even know that was mine until my husband pointed out that, like, I say this all the time. I was like, oh yeah, I do. And I actually internally say it. And I didn't even realize I was saying it all the time.
I love it. It's a small but meaningful step to be your own cheerleader.
Yes, absolutely.
Neelu Kaur, I love it. Thank you so much for giving us your wisdom today and being part of No More Mondays. I appreciate your time and this really cool perspective. This is different than a lot of conversations we've had both on this show and that are happening out there in the world. And I think it needs to be heard. And I appreciate you.
Of course. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah. And Neelu and I both want to challenge all of you out there. Where have you either been waiting for permission, or where do you need to interrupt the pattern? If you need a little accountability or you need a little support, drop each of us a LinkedIn note. We want to hear from you, and we want to hear about what your voice is ready to say. As far as this voice goes, I want to thank all of you for being here on No More Mondays. Big thank you once again to Neelu for reminding us that the most powerful voices are not always the loudest, but we owe it to ourselves to make sure ours, loud or quiet, is heard. If you are a faithful listener of No More Mondays, A, thank you. And B, don't forget to check out our midweek mini to help you with midweek momentum to get through the end of the week. Otherwise, I will catch you next week for another edition of No More Mondays podcast.